the back to kindly come forward. As we commence the first lecture of this course, the title of this lecture is Heritage Conservation, Heritage Definitions and Criteria, UNESCO Listing, Charters, Laws, Conventions for Heritage Conservation on an international level. This lecture will be delivered by Professor Carl Zankel. I would like to mention that this is the only lecture which is scheduled over here, and all other lectures will be held in the seminar hall of our department. I now request Professor Carl to begin the lecture.
So, thank you. So this is the course. So let me start. We are talking about architecture and identity in this speech. I will give you a short overview. What is heritage? Definitions, criteria, terminology, history, and then international heritage conservation by UNESCO, by charters, laws, objectives. Let me start with an important architect in the history of the United Kingdom, Sir Christopher Wren. In 1750 he stated, "Architecture has always been a political use. Public buildings are the ornament of a country. Architecture establishes a nation, draws people and communities, and makes them love their native country." This is what he stated more than 250 years ago. At those times of Christopher Wren, as well as today, architecture is an expression for and of a society, in the past and in the present. But we want to focus on an era that most of normal people don't expect to be heritage. The architecture after independence, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. Let me call those buildings young-timers. We don't know how to treat them properly. Everybody understands that these buildings, the Taj or temples, are heritage, and they have to be preserved, they have to be listed. Even those buildings, the buildings of the Raj, they are listed, they belong to the Indian national heritage. But let me also talk even about young-timers. Yeah? You see the Baha'i temple in Delhi. It's a very young building. It's not listed, but it represents one part, not the major part, but one part of Indian culture. So let me call those buildings young-timers or architectural teenagers, as I just said before. Yeah. So the old-timer and the young-timer, I hardly see ambassadors on the streets right now, but I love them, to be honest, and I miss them. And they belong to the national identity of an upcoming new India after 1947. It is a symbol for this nation. We don't know how to treat those. We don't know how to treat those heritage buildings properly. They are not old enough to be listed, and they are not protected as our national heritage. But by today's standards, they are no longer considered as modern. So they are not heritage, but they are not modern anymore. So what to do with them? And why is it important to preserve? These buildings are the first manifestation of a modern, emerging Indian nation. Every university, every government office from those times represent a statement. India, the new India, is shaping, and buildings are symbolizing its own future now. this goes far, far beyond aesthetics. It's national symbolism. So, I will draw in the next few days a comparison to the dawn of the new era in Europe after World War II later, but this comparison is not completely accurate. Europe had to recover from devastation, from a war. India had to create a new nation, a new identity apart from the colonial era, and the architecture in India since independence therefore is an exceptional, very exceptional example. The architecture of these first years express and strengthen the momentum in this new young nation in a modern era with modern architecture. Many of you know those buildings either in Shivnath Prasad in Sri Ram Center or Palika Kendra, Delhi. Everybody close to Corner Place is impressed by these landmarks. Those are not buildings, they are landmarks. So, to go back. India's post-colonial architecture represents a rich dialogue between the country's colonial past and its aspirations for independence, identity and modernity. The buildings from the 50s to the 70s were not only modern structures, they were symbols of this modern Nehruvian idea of India, of India's identity. During this course, we will unpack the question, why is this architecture of independence still underestimated? And I suppose it is. A lot of people look back at that topic as dated or even outdated, not historic or not of historic importance. But to preserve these buildings, most of them built with exposed concrete in this, we call it brutalism style, needs much more technical effort than expected. So we need modern technologies, specialized engineering to preserve this appropriate, this heritage in an appropriate way. Conservation and refurbishment, concrete surfaces. We will talk about that in 2 or 3 days. We need technologies different from the standard we use for temples or for castles. Preserving young timers, and those are young timers in my eyes, and giving them a properly new and adaptive reuse is opening up a huge potential for developing new cultural activities, tourism, and new ways of working environment and living environment. So this is an introduction to the topic, but let me first of all start to define or try to define the expression, what is heritage? What is heritage? We distinguish into intangible heritage. Intangible means cultural practices, expressions, knowledge. And the intangible heritage encompasses non-physical aspects of culture, aspects that are past, or no, aspects that are passed down through all the generations. So country or people in the country still live and practice these aspects of life. This includes traditions, rituals, ceremonies, knowledge, practices, language, and performing arts. In contrary to that, or in exchange to that, tangible heritage is a physical objects and sites. It's including artifacts, structures that have cultural, historical, or artistic value, and examples are monuments, buildings, artifacts, landscapes, and work of art. We also consider Yeah, this is just some few examples from tangible heritage in India. Landscape, very important also. And art. And books I already mentioned. Also, manuscripts or maps are our tangible heritage, like the manuscripts of Gandhiji or old ancient maps. This is tangible heritage and has to be preserved, and it is preserved. In Europe, we have different tasks, but we also distinguish in tangible and intangible. So let me try to find out what is a monument. We often talk about this monument expression, but how can we come closer to that? An architectural monument is definitely more specific part of our tangible heritage. It's a building or a structure. Building or a structure that holds significant historical, cultural, architectural, social value, and it's often recognized and preserved for its outstanding values. We will deal with the aspects of our heritage and its conservation. What does that mean? What does conservation mean? What is an architectural monument again? Building or structure that holds significant historical, cultural, architectural, or social value, and it's often preserved for its outstanding qualities. This is the definition for monument. And heritage conservation refers to the practices and processes aimed to preserve this and aimed to protect and maintain our buildings, our heritage buildings. For that, for the goals of heritage conservation, we have to safeguard cultural identity, we have to maintain historical continuity, and we have to promote the understanding and appreciation of our culture and our cultural heritage. Let me note some important wordings and aspects. When we have seminars or talk about our heritage, we talk about preservation, restoration, rehabilitation, documentation, legislation and protection, public awareness, sustainable management. Let's start with preservation. Preservation means maintaining and stabilizing existing structures, artifacts, and it means practices to prevent further decay. Restoration is a little bit different. Restoration means repair. Repair and restore heritage items or parts of it to a previous state. So restoration means to go back one step, two steps, three steps to a previous state, and is often using historical records and materials to ensure authenticity. Rehabilitation, something completely different, is adapting heritage sites for contemporary use while retaining their historical and cultural significance. This is rehabilitation. It can involve updating buildings for a new purpose or updating without compromising their heritage values. So it's still the meaning and the background of the building is still the same, but it has a new adaptive use. Documentation is recording, a detailed recording information about the heritage site, about the structures, artifacts and practices. It includes historical research, architectural drawings, photographs, written records. Legislation and protection is implementing laws and regulations to protect the sites and objects from damage, destruction, alterations. It includes international treaties, national laws, and local ordinances. We will also take a look at public awareness and education, promoting the importance of heritage conservation through education. This is what we're doing here. Community involvement is important, and public awareness campaigns, even they are important. It helps to foster a sense of ownership and responsibility towards our cultural background, towards our cultural heritage. And in the end, we will also discuss sustainable management, ensuring that heritage conservation practices are sustainable, balancing the needs of preservation with the demands of modern times, of modern development and of tourism. Heritage conservation is a field of many, many disciplines involving historians, archaeologists, architects, conservators, urban planners, landscape planners, community members. All are working together to protect and preserve their history, their cultural background. And they all aim to protect the uniqueness, the individuality of an object, and to give those objects a place in the future. So I hope in this seminar we come closer to most of these aspects, and let's have good discussions, and I hope we can get a deep insight in that field. Before going into the details of buildings and structures, let me first give a overview on the history of this heritage conservation. It has evolved in several phases over the centuries, influenced by changing social, cultural, and technological conditions. But let's start in the antiquity. In Egypt, Mesopotamia, early forms of monument preservation can be found in those civilizations. We know from papyrus scripts that special care was taken to preserve temples and other important buildings. In Greece, Rome, the rulers and kings were interested in the preservation of their own buildings and in their own work of art. This was often religious or political background. A special form of conservation and maintenance of building stock was to prevent soldiers from the plundering of buildings and from the devastation of building materials in conquered cities. So there were laws already under the Roman legislation that soldiers were not allowed to destroy important historic buildings like temples and palaces. In medieval times, heritage conservation focused mainly on religious buildings, such as churches, monasteries, cathedrals. The preservation was very often linked to religious practices. Then in 15th, 16th century, during Renaissance, the rebirth of the antiquity, special interest was taken into ancient art and architecture. There was an awakened awareness for the preservation of monuments. A systematic study started, a systematic study of ancient buildings and works of art. 18th century, Enlightenment, Romanticism, the period of those times evolved a growing historical awareness and appreciation of the past eras. This led to an increased focus on the preservation of historical buildings, and examples of those times include restoration work on Gothic cathedrals, ancient monuments. The 19th century brought some change. The first monument preservation organizations in Europe and in Germany were founded to protect and restore historic buildings. In those times, the preservation of monuments was more and more organized on an institutional basis. National monument protection authorities were founded in many countries in the West, like the Commission des Monuments Historiques in France in 1837, or in Germany, the Verein für Geschichte und Altertumskunde, 1827. So it was the start of an official and governmental regulation on heritage conservation. The first theoretical writings on preservation were produced by John Ruskin, a British fellow, and a French called Eugène Viollet-le-Duc. So Ruskin emphasized the preservation and the original substance, and Viollet-le-Duc, as his counterpart in France, propagated restoration in keeping the original style, not the original structure, but the original style. I will go deep in that in next lecture. Another very important development came later from Italy. Camillo Boito, an architect and writer in Rome, he published 1883 the Prima Carta del Restauro, the first book on restoration. And we conservationists call this the Bible for restoration and conservation. It was a very important book that he wrote and he published. And let me just give you a very brief overview on this. He postulated 8 theses. He said, differentiation, old, new in design. We have to distinguish what is old, what is new when we restore. Differentiation in material, omission of decorative in the repair of new addition, leave decoration away, exhibit the removed elements on site, indicate the installation period on the new components, so give a mark on every new part, when was it added to the old structure, indicate the scope of construction and the new components, document during the construction phases, and do a publication of the result. These were his thesis, and still a lot of conservationists follow these guidelines. It laid the foundation for the later development, and I will focus on that, the so-called Charter of Venice in 1964. The 20th century brought a big change. Modern heritage conservation continued to develop with an increasing focus on the preservation of historical authenticity and the importance of a monument's context. So the Athens Charter from 1931 for the restoration of historical monuments was adopted at the first International Congress of Architects and Technicians of Historical Monuments, and it was setting early principles for conservation. I already mentioned the Venice Charter, 1964. It has established international standards for conservation, and it emphasized the importance of scientific methodology and the preservation of historic fabric. I will focus on that later. It's a very important, it's a very important step that was taken. Post-war period, after the Second World War, this is a picture of the devastation which we faced in my country. Many cities were completely destroyed. The city where I come from, Würzburg, was destroyed in one night. In one night, 85% of all buildings were just flattened. So we had a lot of, it was a challenge to rebuild these cities, and heritage conservation focused on the reconstruction of the historic structure, the historic fabric, and the historic buildings. The devastations in Europe and also in Asia highlighted the need for international cooperation. So, the rebuilding efforts included restoring significant cultural sites, protecting them from future conflicts. Yeah, and today, monument preservation is not only a matter to include individual buildings, but it also includes historic city districts, landscapes, and industrial monuments, so that it widened up. We have interdisciplinary approach. Heritage conservation is increasingly integrating architecture, history, archaeology, history and engineering, and we need sustainability in what we are doing, and we need participation. Current issues also mean public involvement. They are becoming increasingly important in conserving our history. So this history of conservation shows a continuous development from the Roman times till now, and it starts from the preservation of religious and political buildings and becomes comprehensive now, scientifically based, as an approach today that preserves the diversity of all our cultural heritage. As an international organization to preserve and to work on heritage conservation, I have to explain you the UNESCO, how it's developed, how it's working. It stands for United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. And it's an agency of the United Nations, established in 1945, right after World War II, after the destructions, with the aim of promoting world peace. So the UNESCO was introduced to promote peace through preserving culture. UNESCO now has 194 member states and 11 associate members. This was 1924. Headquarters in Paris. It's governed by the General Conference and it meets every second year. Last year in 2024, the meeting was held in July in New Delhi. International charters and conventions that are important is the founding of the United Nations in 1945. It became a key player in the conservation after World War II. In 1954, the Hague Convention for the protection of cultural property in the event of armed conflict was adopted. That means, very important, it was establishing guidelines to safeguard cultural heritage during war, during conflicts. And what we can see often now, take a look at Afghanistan, what these Taliban did to their Buddhist heritage. They just blasted them off, they just destroyed everything. So this was 54. In 64, the already mentioned Charter of Venice was adopted. It provided a comprehensive framework for the conservation. In 1972, the UNESCO Convention was adopted, creating the World Heritage List. The list is started in 72, and the list is to recognize and protect sites of outstanding universal value. This convention established the World Heritage Committee, and the criteria for listing were set up. Then in 82 we had the Burra Charter. It was adopted in Australia, creating, but emphasizing the importance of cultural significance and community involvement. So it's not only a matter of specialty, it's also a matter of community involvement in preserving our past. And in 94, the Nara document of authenticity was adopted. It was emphasizing the need to consider cultural context in conservation practices. Then in 2003, the Convention of Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage was adopted, recognizing the importance of intangible heritage, traditions, rituals, oral histories. And last but not least, 2005, the protection and promotion of the diversity of cultural expressions, also intangible, was adopted, highlighting the importance of cultural diversity. All these charters, conventions reflect a growing global awareness of the importance of preserving, recognizing the value of our heritage, not only for historical and cultural reasons, but also fostering identity. And this is, I think, the most important thing. Our heritage is fostering our future, our identity for the future. It's fostering diversity and mutual understanding among different communities and different nations. What are the objectives from UNESCO? First of all, promoting peace and security. UNESCO aims to build peace, security through international cooperation. In cooperation in education, cooperation in science, and in communication. Second, education. The UNESCO list or the UNESCO engagement should ensure inclusive and equitable quality, educating and promoting lifelong learning and opportunities for all in a society. Third is science, promoting international scientific cooperation, supporting research, supporting development in natural and social sciences. This is also a very important objective. Addressing sustainability, environmental protection through scientific programs. And culture, the next point, protecting, preserving the cultural heritage, promoting diversity, and fostering intercultural dialogue. Managing the lists to identify and safeguard sites on outstanding universal value. And last but not least, communication and information. The UNESCO is about to promote freedom of expression and press freedom, facilitating the free flow of ideas, enhancing media literacy and access to information and communication technologies. Let me just tell you about a few key programs. There are many more, but these are the key programs of the UNESCO. The World Heritage Program identifies and protects cultural natural heritage sites, outstanding universal value. And for that we have this World Heritage List by UNESCO. Then there another program is the Man and Biosphere, MAB program. It promotes sustainable development through the conservation of biosphere reserves in many countries, especially in South America, Amazonas area. There are a lot of projects going on. Global networking of learning centers, GNLC, supports cities worldwide in promoting lifelong learning and educating for sustainable development. And the last one is the Memory of the World program. It preserves and provides access to documentary heritage of significant value. What are the efforts and challenges? The UNESCO has a very important impact. It plays a crucial role in fostering international collaboration in education, science, and it's about to promote culture, to be sustainable, and to have to look at our culture in a long-term a way of thinking, not in a short-term understanding. So they promote to preserve culture, to ensure peace across the globe. Efforts and challenges, we have sustainable conservation and risk monument, modern conservation efforts of different programs focus on sustainability. They are addressing the impacts of climate change, the impacts of urbanization, and the impacts of tourism on heritage sites. And during the last years, the concept of cultural landscapes came up, it emerged, recognizing the interconnectedness of natural and cultural heritage. Then we have international cooperation and capacity building. Ongoing international efforts are essential to support conservation, especially in developing countries. And organizations like the ICOMOS, International Council of Monuments and Sites, and the ICC-ROM, the International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Heritage, they play the main roles, the crucial roles in these efforts. Let me show you about a little bit statistics or numbers at least. World Heritage Sites are landmarks or areas recognized by the UNESCO. For what? For their outstanding universal value to humanity. Not to a country, to humanity. The Convention concerning the protection of the world cultural heritage and cultural and natural heritage is one of the most recognized international agreements and the world's most popular cultural program. So the sites are selected based on the cultural, historical, scientific or natural significance. The designation aims to encourage the preservation and the protection of the sites for future generations. So to be selected as a UNESCO listed site, you have to go, or a country has to undergo a certain procedure. A site is nominated by the host country and determined by the International Committee to be a unique landmark, having a special culture or a special physical significance, and it must be under the system of legal protection. So, for example, World Heritage Site might be ancient or historical. It might be a building, a city, it also can be a desert, a forest, islands, lakes, monuments, mountains, wilderness, whatever. The site may signify a remarkable accomplishment of humanity and serve as evidence of our intellectual history on the planet, or it might be a place of great natural beauty. So in April 20, it's not right, it's April 25, we have 1,248 World Heritage Sites in 170 countries, with 972 cultural sites, 235 natural sites, and 41 mixed cultural and natural properties. Just maybe. Okay. Let me just have a look at the map worldwide. You see, there is a very dense appearance of UNESCO listing in Europe. Italy is the country with 61 areas and has most sites. China has 60, Germany 55, France 54, India is listed with 44 sites. The sites are intended for practical conservation for the future generations and declared by UNESCO as protected zones. I go back now. The program of the UNESCO is intending practical conservation for the future, and it aims to conserve only sites of outstanding cultural or natural importance. Effects. Being listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site can affect the site. It can affect the environment and everything in its vicinity in many ways. A listed site gains international recognition and legal protection, and it can obtain funds from the World Heritage Fund to facilitate its conservation under certain conditions. The old city of Ahmedabad here, for instance, is listed since 2017, is one of India's UNESCO listed sites. And I know Ahmedabad quite well. The impact of the listing was tremendous, in both ways, positive and negative. The impact of the UNESCO title to the old city, the former walled city, are very visible and obvious. Increasing tourism, traffic growth, increased pollution, but government and municipality are taking important steps for the conservation of the structures. I will talk with you about these impacts, especially my experiences in Ahmedabad in the next tutorial. The nomination process for UNESCO World Heritage Site is a long-term and a long ongoing process. A country first must identify its significant cultural site in a document known as the tentative list. Next, it can place this list into a nomination file which is evaluated by the International Council of Monuments, ICOMOS, and the World Conservation Union. And then these two international bodies make a recommendation to UNESCO World Heritage Committee. The committee meets once a year and it tries to determine which nominated properties to add to the list. Sometimes it postpones its decision or it requests more information for the country that nominated the site. For nomination to be included in the list, the site must be of outstanding universal value and it must meet at least one of those 10 selection criteria. The criteria are regularly revised by the committee to reflect the evolution of the heritage concept itself. So let me just go very quick on that. Otherwise we could get a time problem. The selection criteria are, no, I don't, I think it's, we do that later in the tutorial. We discuss these 10 criteria afterwards. I better go with you back to the to these statistics, or to these maps. This is a worldwide overview, and for India, I find 44 heritage sites, 36 are cultural, 7 are natural, and 1 is a mixed type. This is Kanchenjunga National Park. It's natural and cultural heritage. So India has the 6th most sites worldwide. The first site listed was Ajanta, the Ajanta Caves, the Ellora Caves, Agra Fort and Taj Mahal. They were inscribed in the list in the 1972 list in 1983. The most recent site was Shantiniketan. These are the Indian sites. The most recent site was Shantiniketan and the sacred ensemble of the Hoysalas in 2023. 2 sites were endangered. No, this is the very new one, the Maratha military landscape of India. This I found in the new list. This came into the heritage list in 2025. So here you see that the countries, Italy, China, France and Germany and Spain are the countries with most of heritage sites, and then India is number 6. There's also a list, again, that on the globe, most of the heritage sites are in Europe. Unfortunately, it doesn't represent reality. It represents political will, and well, many of us are not happy about that. I think India and other countries deserve much more attention. So that's it's a political. Well, UNESCO is a political organization. We have to be very frank about that. And those countries who are giving most money on that, they try to influence. And we are not happy. Anyway, there's also a list of heritage sites in danger. So there are some objects like the city of Bamiyan Valley in Afghanistan. I've been already talking about that. The Taliban blasted all the Buddhist monuments away. The historic town of Sabit in Yemen. So if a site is put on the list of World Heritage in danger, it's a big pressure on the government, on the local government then. Problems may involve in armed conflicts and war, in natural disasters, in pollution, whatever, or uncontrolled urbanism or human development. This danger list is intended to increase international awareness and to force counteractive measures. Threats to a site can be either proven, imminent, or potential dangers that could have adverse effects on the site. There, 53 are on the list now. 14 naturals, 39 cultural, and 22 of the listed sites are located in the Arab states. 12 in Africa, 6 in Latin America, and 6 in Asia and Pacific, and 7 in Europe. The group of monuments in Hampi, which is on the Indian list, was discussed to be set on the list of endangered sites, but finally the local administration and the political structure around Hampi solved the problems. The problems were 2 or 3 bridges close by the temples and development of new roads who came very close to this group of monuments in Hampi. But under the pressure of the UNESCO, the local authorities stopped all this development. So Hampi was never on the endangered list, but was intended to become to get on the list. But in the end, it went out quite well I think for all parts. Yeah, the effects, we will talk about that. There's a lot of pros and cons. To be on the list, the status World Heritage Site provides a unique identity and a worldwide recognition. It fetches international attention. It may increase tourism, and it will ensure economic benefits to the nation. Funds are generated. Often this World Heritage Site list promotes the feeling of pride amongst the people. It protects the site against misuse, of destruction. It also implements activities such as heritage walks, for instance, street theaters, heritage awards. It's encouraging the participation of various community members. It's strengthening the unity amongst the people. But there are also cons, and we will discuss that in the afternoon. When more tourists start visiting the sites are consequently the entire city, the sites and consequently the entire city become overcrowded. This is what happens in Andorra. In order to meet the increasing demands, the locals become dependent on the tourist trades. They are opening shops, hotels, restaurants to fulfill the new demand. So the social structure in those places is changing. The inhabitants of heritage properties cannot install modern amenities without permission. So it may ruin, because they may ruin the historic value. Vehicles are a big problem. Vehicle ownership becomes very difficult as there is no parking in those old structures. And the tenants need to take special permission from concerned authorities to renovate or refurbish the places. And last but not least, the tenants also have a responsibility of maintaining heritage value of the property. So it's a very interesting and wide field, and I hope we can discuss in the late afternoon, in the second part in the tutorial, the pros and cons and the impact of these listings. Thank you very much. They are important. It helps to foster a
enriching knowledge about heritage and World Heritage Site all across the world. And now we would like to take few questions from the audience. आप कुछ क्वेश्चन करना चाहेंगे सर से? Or any comment, any feedback? Please, sir.
On traffic, density, etc. How does the ingress of tourists,
Please again.
apart from
Yeah.
putting pressure on the traffic
Yeah.
or the built-up density
Yeah.
or maybe pollution, how does the ingress of additional load, footfall in the monumental area affect the structure? Is there any relation between them?
Well, there must be a relation. The traffic is always the biggest issue. Keeping cars out or finding parking areas outside the structure. What happened in Ahmedabad? They were taking away modern structures and converting them into parking space outside the walls, the protected areas, and gave those spaces to the people living inside. This was one thing, just to get rid of the heavy pressure of traffic inside this post. And then they faced a change in the economic structure, because shopkeepers who were selling vegetable or fruit suddenly became cafes. So there was even an economic change in this old parts of the city, and it's still an ongoing process. It's since 2017, 8 years, and the municipality of Ahmedabad is still trying to handle this change, this progress in change. It's really difficult. Yeah.
Most of the old structures,
Yeah.
monuments,
Yeah.
they didn't have cooking holes that time. The problem of master food at derivation, probably they will not allow injecting now the modern chemicals, etc. into that. Do you have any solution for combating that moisture issue that comes from below?
Yeah, the rising water table is a big problem for most of our protected sites. I'm just working on a project in Thailand, in the former capital of Thailand, Ayutthaya, the king city, has a problem with rising water table, so salination,
Most of the
dampness.
sites, yes.
So they are during the last 30, 40 years, they didn't react on that. They just plastered it with cement, creating a perfect outlook, but behind this, everything was in decay. Now they started to remove all these repair measurements from those times, and to get a horizontal barrier inside without chemical methods, But if we will have a look on the Venice Charter later, next lecture. Venice Charter explicitly allows to use modern materials and modern technologies. So I think this is changing now, and in my country we are allowed even to protect damp walls from rising water tables with very modern materials, ramming methods, whatever. So this is a changing process now. I'm not sure how it is working here. Ahmedabad doesn't have a problem with this because the old city is on a kind of, it's not a hill, but it's far above.
Many of the monuments are located on the banks
Yeah.
of the rivers, so the water table.
Yeah. This is a big issue. We use modern technologies. So we are allowed to, and we do.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions? We have our students from architecture department, bachelors and masters. And we have also few representatives from BSDMA and Patna Municipal Corporation. And so, any more questions from you? Samad.
UNESCO. Does it become permanent, or it can be removed from the list also?
It can be removed, like if it's put on the list of endangered monuments. The UNESCO is giving a chance to the country or to the government to solve the problem, and if not, they can remove it. In Germany, we had a very interesting case that the city of Dresden has a very interesting shape on the riverbank. Very interesting. And this shape was protected by UNESCO. And then the municipality decided to build a new bridge. And the new bridge destroyed the view. So they put Dresden out of the list. It was a big political issue. The pressure from the government to release the traffic was higher than the pressure through UNESCO to put them. They were first on the endangered list for a couple of years, and now they got out of the listing. It was a big issue. Long discussion. Finally, the concerns for the traffic got the overhand on that.
That means only when they are in endangered,
Yeah.
they need to, it will be removed.
Endangered or destroyed. Yeah. Many natural, like the Amazonas rainforest, is on the list. But if the environmental problems there will increase, UNESCO will also take that out of the list. Same Kanchenjunga. Yeah? If there is no problem up there in Assam, but if there would be a problem, first UNESCO would react and would put it on the endangered list, and then they would take it out if there is no solution for that. It's a very strong instrument, very strong, because it's an international instrument, so the whole world is looking on that. It's UNESCO is a very important organization for preserving.
Thank you, sir. Any more question? So that sum up our today's session. So we have just introduced the background information on basics of heritage management, conservation, right? And we have lunch coupons on the back of our